So I just got done updating the database project prototype in a couple ways. The first thing I did was I removed the submit button that was here before and updated the prototype to just automatically submit on keystroke. So you can see now that if I change my name from Terry to, say, Thomas, you'll see that it's updating the database real time. And the same is true coming backwards. If I was to change my last name to Terry Caliendo, hello. This doesn't happen real time because this isn't set up to fire back real time. But when I click update from the database, it shows up there pretty much instantaneously. So, but again, going back, you can see that it's real time with each keystroke. And all I did for that was, instead of having a submit button, I just simply call the @keyUp, which would be like an on click in JavaScript. So this is, Vue's form of implementing those calls in JavaScript. So if you look here in the repository, this is GitKraken, which allows you to see the difference. It allows you to see your repository and all your changes over time for Git. So if I take a look at the changes that I made from the old to the new, you can see that I used to have a click, I used to have a button, submit button, where I called @click. I called the submit event when the button was clicked. Now I just simply call the submit event whenever a keystroke happens and the key is released upwards. And that just calls that same submit function. It changed from old to new just in that I changed the names and did a little other stuff. But still, it's the same thing. It's submitting the information to the database on the upstroke of pressing a key. Now, in the long run, that's going to raise my costs because Firebase charges you for each commit to the database. So each keystroke will actually be a commit to the database. So ultimately, at some point, I'm going to put in some kind of rate limiting function where, as the user types, it'll only submit every, once the system has realized the user has stopped typing, and that's just a plugin I can find somewhere that I need to find and implement. So that's the first thing I changed, and then the second thing that I changed was I moved the calls from the data from acting directly on the global storage model. This is what it's doing here, the old stuff. So in the old way, I called the store to get the primary relative caregiver, which is this object that we're changing the name of, or changing the information on. It is, this database stuff right here, and whoa, we don't want to do that. And this stuff right here. So I was acting on the database directly, and I showed in another video that caused my Vuex state to be out of sorts. So if I looked at my Vuex, which is my global storage, I would make those changes and this wouldn't get updated. But now, as I make the changes, you can see that the Vuex knows about those changes because I am using the mutations, the proper mutations. So that's what is happening here. Instead of directly acting on the object from the storage, I'm now using getters and setters to call to make commits on the store. So here I can get the information from the store, and this whole garble mess here is just so that, because there's no initial state, so I have to check and see if the initial state exists. If it does, then I can return the data for the first name. If the initial state doesn't exist, so that the application has loaded and hasn't reached out asynchronously to Firestore to get the data, I just return an empty string. If I didn't do that, I get JavaScript errors saying that the property doesn't exist for first name on the object, so because it hasn't populated yet. So that's a lot of extra code that you have to do, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. Before, it did expand my code out. Before, it was real easy to just work on the information, and now I have to write all this extra code to do the same thing. I have to do the getters and the setters for each one, and not only that, I had to figure out how to easily update each of the names, and so I ended up sending an object with the parameter and the value, and then you'll see in the storage. Let's see, where is in the store? Yes. So I'm just updating this is the call. So I'm coming from here, update current primary relative caregiver by object. So I'm updating it by an object. So we come to here, update current primary relative caregiver by object. I send in the property, and then I loop over those properties, so it could be an object of as many keys, and then I just basically set the storage, the local storage, which is the global Vuex storage, its key, which in this case, if I was updating the first name, would be first name, and I set it by the object that came in. So it's kind of hard to show, but it's this object that's being looped over as it goes through. So I can generically send whatever I want to send, as opposed to in the storage having a update current primary caregiver first name, and then I'd have to have another function update current primary relative caregiver last name, and it just makes my code even longer. So to try and shrink it down, I'm just sending an object that I can loop over and add those properties into the global storage object. And then because I'm calling a mutation, this is in the mutations section, then Vuex knows that it's supposed to update its knowledge of the global object. So I can actually go back here, and if I go back to this commit, so I haven't figured out on GitKraken how to go back a commit. They don't like you to have your head be off. So I can do it here, though. I can do a git checkout call to that commit, and now my code has changed back to the old code. You can see that the submit button is back. So if I go back to my application, the data is not updating real time. I actually have to hit the submit button, and then it updates. So I'm back to my old program. Now if we look at this, because I wasn't doing the proper mutations, you can see that this is no longer in sync with, well, actually because I'm not using the proper mutations, the object never even got set. It still thinks the object is false, but it should have this object in it. So my getting function, in the code, actually in the store, where I first initialize the primary relative caregiver from the store, let's see, no, that's the set. I want the get, where I get the information from the Firebase store. I go out and get the information from the collection. I simply save it directly to the state object from within I'm in the store, but I should have called a commit, which is what I do in the latest change. So if we look at the store and look at the difference in that area, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find this readily. Let's see, where is this is the new commit set. So where's the getter? Here it is. So the old way Let me figure this out. So here it is. It's the alls that I changed was before I was directly setting the context.state, so the local storage current primary caregiver, but now I'm committing, instead of directly acting on it, I'm committing to a function that's initializing it and sending the properties. So that by calling that commit, Vuex knows to update internally what's happening on its object. So that gets a little deep, but hopefully you saw by the visual that that it's not getting updated here unless you do things right. So that's it for this. That was a lot of extra information. Probably could have had that done in about 3 minutes, but ended up going 10 minutes. So anyway, have a great day.